Hey y'all, it's Miss A. Today we are going to be looking at an introduction to order of operations. This is something that you should have learned in 5th grade, the basic order of operations that you always multiply or divide before you add or subtract. Maybe you saw some groupings in there, but in 6th grade we are going to see a lot more to it. We're going to have integers, we're going to have things called exponents, so it gets a little bit more tricky in 6th grade, but this is just an introduction to it. And I'll explain more of that in here in just a second. So, first of all, before we get started, guys, please make sure you're taking notes. This is going to be a longer video because of the topic that it is. It requires a lot of explanation and rewriting the problem. But please follow along, please take notes, and be ready to ask me questions when you join me on Zoom or shoot me an email, okay? All right, so when you learned order of operations in 5th grade, you probably learned it as with the phrase PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which is great. If you want to continue using that, that's okay. But in middle school, we're trying to get away from PEMDAS and get into the term GEMS, okay? The reason is in middle school and high school, you're not going to see just parentheses anymore. You're now going to see brackets and braces, but they all represent the same thing. They represent groupings. So we're going to use G for groupings. Then we're going to get into the letter E, which is exponents. That was in PEMDAS as well. But in this unit, because it's an intro, we are not going to be looking at exponents at all today. So you'll always be able to skip this step in the order of operations, today at least. And then after exponents comes M. This is our multiply and divide. So that's the MD in PEMDAS. The reason they get away from that is because you always want to multiply before you divide, because that's what PEMDAS says to do in the order that it's listed. But here they're both on the same level, so we have to do them in order from left to right, okay? When there's both of them in the problem, you always do whatever comes first in the problem and then whatever comes second. Same thing for S, which stands for add and subtract from left to right, okay? So we have a new acronym, GEMS, groupings, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract, okay? Most important thing you need to remember today is that you always multiply and divide before you add or subtract. Always, always, always. Multiply and divide before you add and subtract. Unless addition, subtractions, and groupings, but that's a whole other story. Okay, before we get started on the examples, we need to kind of briefly go over our integer rules that we spent the last 2 weeks going over in class. So the first one is when we're multiplying and dividing. Remember, multiply and divide is actually the easiest of the integer operations. We're going to multiply or divide like normal. Then we're going to use our triangle to determine if it's a positive or negative number. Okay, so if I have 2 negatives, then I cover up my 2 negatives. My answer would be positive. If I have 1 negative and 1 positive, I cover it up and my answer would be negative. Okay, very, very simple multiplying and dividing. Adding and subtracting, the rules are a little bit different. We don't use the triangle, okay? Don't use the triangle at all unless I have back-to-back touching signs. Remember I told you I don't like that. It looks weird. That's the only time we'll ever use the triangle, when we're adding and subtracting. Here we're actually looking for if the signs are the same or if they're different. So if the signs are the same, we're actually going to add the numbers. If the signs are different, we're going to end up subtracting. And then the problem y'all have is that y'all can get this down. If the signs are different, subtract. But then when the signs are different, y'all go up here and you cover this up and say the answer is negative. You don't do that for adding and subtracting. You always keep the sign of the bigger number. Okay? Do not use your triangle to determine the answer when adding and subtracting. Only for multiplying and dividing. Okay, so let's get into an example. We're going to have quite a few. Like I said, we're going to have 4. I just want to make sure you get plenty of them. All right, so our first example right here is negative 15 plus a negative 5 minus 30 divided by 3. All right, so if we remember our order of operations, first comes GEMS, which is grouping. So we're going to look if we have groupings. Now remember that even though I have parentheses here, this doesn't necessarily mean groupings, because the groupings have to have something to do within the parentheses, okay? So inside those parentheses, I only have a negative 5. So that does not mean it's groupings. These parentheses literally just are having you recognize that this 5 is a negative, okay? This is not considered groupings. This is just showing that the number is negative. So what I'm going to do to eliminate that confusion is I'm going to rewrite the problem without the parentheses. Okay? Again, only because there's nothing to do within it. If there was 1 minus 5 or 3 plus 5, then I would have to do it first. Okay? So I'm going to rewrite it without the parentheses there. All right, now I can get into solving. The first thing I am going to look for is, remember, if I have like a plus, a negative, or minus a negative, that looks weird. So I'm going to look for that in the problem, which I don't have. I do have these two signs back to back, but that's division, so I don't have to worry about it. All right, now I can go to the next step of the order of operations. Again, we're skipping exponents for this unit. Our next thing is to multiply and divide from left to right. So I'm going to box any number in the problem that involves multiplication or division. All right, so here's division. So this division problem is negative 15 divided by negative 5. This is just something I like to do, guys. Just me personally. All right, so there's a division problem. This is subtraction, and this is division. Okay, so I've got both of those boxed. So now I'm going to do those two things first. That's why I like boxing it, because it kind of just has it stick out to me of what I need to complete first before I'm moving on to the next step of the order of operations. So I'm going to divide. Remember, when we're dividing, we are using our triangle, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is divide like normal. 15 divided by 5. Remember, use your multiplication chart. Skip count by 5s until you get to 15, whatever you need to do. Negative 15 divided by negative 5 gets me 3. And then if both numbers are negative, then my answer will in fact be positive. So it is positive 3. Then I have this minus sign. And then 30 divided by 3 gets me 10. Both numbers are positive, so it stays positive. Now I'm on to my last step. I've done all the multiplication and division. Now I'm going to add and subtract. All right, this is a subtraction problem, but remember, when we're adding and subtracting, we're looking for same sign or different signs. So the 3 is positive, the 10 is negative. So 3 is positive, 10 is negative, so the signs are different. So when the signs are different, I'm actually going to subtract. 10 minus 3, because the bigger number is 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. And then, of course, at the very last, we always need to keep the sign of the bigger number. Keep the sign of the bigger number. 10 was bigger, it was negative, so my answer is negative 7. So in our problem, we rewrote without the parentheses because that parentheses really didn't represent groupings. Then I did my boxing of my multiplication and division, which I only had division in this problem. But I boxed that step of the order of operations, solved it, and then I did my last step. I was only down to 1. All right, let's do another one. We've got negative 5. Now remember that this dot right here means multiply. So negative 5 times 4 minus a negative 12. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to look for are our groupings. Remember, groupings have to have something within it to complete. So I do have a grouping here. I do have parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside of it. So these parentheses are just representing a negative number. So I'm going to rewrite it. Negative 5 times, you can also put an X here if that dot confuses you. Times 4 minus a negative 12. Okay, got rid of those parentheses because they were confusing me. I don't need them for groupings. All right, before I continue on my order of operations, I'm going to look for signs that are back to back, anything that looks weird. Here, you notice I do have that. I have 2 negatives back to back. So remember that 2 negatives can come together and make a positive, either using your triangle or just think about this. Literally, you could take these two, turn one of them, and make it into a plus. Okay. Once I combine those, because it looks kind of weird, I'm going to rewrite the problem. Back here, I have 12. These are now gone. Then I have my 4, my dot for multiplication, and my negative 5. All right. Now we can do continue in the order of operations. So we are done with groupings. Got rid of those. We're not going to have exponents. Next step is to multiply and divide from left to right. So we're going to look for multiplication and division. All right, I do have multiplication right here. I don't have any other multiplication or division in the problem, so all I have to do is this one. So here we get negative 5 times positive 4. First of all, 5 times 4 equals 20. 5 times 4 equals 20. And then we're going to use our triangle. 5 is negative, 4 is positive. So negative, positive, and we get negative. So negative 20. And then we're going to bring down that plus 12. And then now here we've got a negative 20 plus 12. So these signs are different. Remember, when they're different, we're going to actually always refer back to these guys. I don't care. The more you look at them, the easier it's going to be to remember. The signs are different. We're going to subtract. So I'm going to do 20 minus 12. Notice I'm not doing it over here under my problem. I want to do all my scratch work on the side if you need to. 20 minus 12 gets me 8. And then we always, again, refer back. Always keep the sign of the bigger number. Keep the sign of the bigger number. So 20 is bigger than 12, so 20 was negative, so my answer is also negative. And that is it. My answer is negative 8. All right, guys, so I'm already at 11 minutes, almost 12. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. We're going to do just 2 examples today. We're going to practice this, try to get this down, and then we'll take it one step further tomorrow, okay? So here, well, I'm going to do 2 examples because it's a long video. Make sure that you are just following your order of operations, guys. That's most important. Don't just do them. Don't go from left to right as the problem appears. Make sure you do your parentheses, which we haven't really seen today yet. Exponents, which we won't see. We always multiply or divide first, and then we add or subtract, okay? Multiply or divide first, and then add or subtract. Once you're done with this video, guys, please join me on Zoom so we can go over a problem together and make sure you don't have any questions, and then we'll go from there. All right, guys, y'all have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.